Leclerc! Leclerc! Charles Leclerc! Welcome back to the podcast. My name is Dan, and I'm joined by Alex. And we talk about Formula One on the Lap Down Pod. We're not allowed to call it the F1 Lap Down Pod, F1 podcast, because otherwise we get banned. But we've had a race. We've got a week off. We can relax. We've got our feet up again. We're exhausted after 2 weeks on the trot. But AB, how are you? Did you enjoy it, sir?
I'm good. I did enjoy it. Even as a McLaren fan, I did enjoy it. It's hard not to get swept. It's like Hamilton winning at Silverstone, isn't it? It's hard not to get swept up in, oh, that was nice. Yeah. You know, if anyone was going to win, I'm glad it was the hot one with the cute dog that's, you know, driving for Ferrari in Italy. You know, that was nice. Plenty involved to get there. But no, I enjoyed it. And I think, again, we'll dive into this a little bit without going too hard too early, but I want to give a shout out at the very start to Pirelli. I think they don't often get a huge amount of credit, and they often cop a lot of flack, and it's a little bit like umpires. You never say well done when they do their job properly, but you just say you're shit when they don't. We had a race where there were two equally viable strategies, very offsetting, and well done. Well done.
Yeah, good for them. Good for them. And their home Grand Prix as well. So
exactly.
They had to step up. Ferrari stepped up. And as you said, as a fan of anybody, obviously if you're a fan of Ferrari and Charles Leclerc, then your quid's in because you've had a great weekend. But it is one of those, it's a bit of a free pass, isn't it? Like you could be the most devout Red Bull Max Verstappen's fan, but the second you see a Ferrari driver stand on top of the podium in their famous various shades of black overalls in front of a Tifosi crowd, then what's not to love about it? On the sliding scale of banger that we often refer to across the course of these podcasts in the season, we decided that Zandvoort was not said banger.
Not a banger.
Where along the lines of Zandvoort to banger would you rate Monza 2024?
It wasn't all action bang, certainly. It was a slow burning bang, but it wasn't a bad race. You know, I enjoyed what was going on. There was enough intrigue in it. I don't think I can label it a banger. But
no.
I'm just, you know, every race can't be a banger, but you don't want every race to be a Zandvoort. So it's sitting nicely in the middle of just good, clean fun. It was good, clean fun is what it was.
Consensual. It was great.
Yeah. What I will say as well on your the iconic black and yellow overalls, didn't get a sense from the big track invasion at the end or a lot of the shots of the crowd that Ferrari necessarily sold a massive amount of merch this weekend because it jumped out at me when I saw two people in the crowd wearing the black and yellow polo, and that was about it. So I don't think I think there's a decent chance TK Maxx might have some polos in like 6 months' time that are going to be black and yellow because I don't think they sold many. And I'm not overly surprised. I think if you're going to go to Monza and you don't have any Ferrari merch, you're probably looking at the red stuff first, unless you've already got some. And if you've already got some, you're probably wearing it. And I don't know. But yeah, there wasn't a lot of black and yellow.
If you were going to buy a T-shirt, there's a bit more longevity in red than there is in the blue that there was in Miami or in this kind of carbon fiber design, which it just wasn't, was it? It was just kind of patchwork shades of grey. It was awful. But anyway, they did it. They won, and good for Charles Leclerc, good for Ferrari. It's amazing what you can do when the mafia boss is kind of leaning over your shoulder and you don't fuck up a pit strategy. So good for them.
Yeah.
Where do we want to talk? Should we talk about Franco Colapinto? Made his debut in the Williams. Good old Colapinto, Franco Colapinto. A few Argentine fans there at the end of the Grand Prix, kind of climbing over the fence.
And a few Argentine companies already on the Williams. That didn't take long. Get those stickers on there.
Don't get them on. Get them on. Get the money.
Them on.
And so far, he's appearing to be signing of the season.
I mean, he didn't Kimi Antonelli into the wall on his second lap, so that's preferable. By the way, Kimi signed everyone like
good for
12 weeks ago, but, you know, Kimi signed everyone. No, he looks entirely competent, which I think if you're Williams, that's what you wanted from him. You're not asking him to go and put it in P6. You don't want him to try and glory run it to P6. You want him to not need another repair on that car for the next 11 races or whatever we've got. And you know, don't pick up any penalties. Don't get us a, you know, unsafe release speeding in the pit lane penalty.
Yep.
And, you know, pop yourself back out the car next year, please, mate, because we've got a Spaniard coming. But Yeah, no, fair play. Well done to the lad. He kept his head down a bit, really, didn't you? You didn't hear a huge amount about him, to be honest. So it's probably a good thing.
He's got no cards to play, has he? No. He literally has to turn up, keep his nose clean, and go home at the end of the season because he isn't going to be in that seat in 2025. And I think it does, and maybe it's a question for another time, but it does kind of beg the question with someone like Kevin Magnussen, for example, which I think we can talk about next nicely, is other than kind of contractual agreements, and like these Formula One teams, well, Haas may be slightly less so than others, but they're not exactly kind of cash strapped, are they? No. Now that they've obviously paid the bailiffs off and the Mazepin conglomerate have disappeared back to their, what do they call those, goulashes in the Siberian.
That's a suit. Yeah,
gulags.
Gulags, what you're after.
They've gone there. Anyway, they've gone there. But anyway, like what other than kind of a contractual obligation, which I'm sure Kevin Magnussen would take a payoff for. Yeah. What's stopping them just kind of giving Ollie Behrman the keys now and giving him 6, 7, 8 Grand Prix? Because Kevin Magnussen's not going to do anything for you. Behrman's likely to race next weekend, assuming that you can drive for 2 teams in the same season.
Why not? If you were a reserve driver, like Mick Schumacher's reserve driver for a couple of teams, isn't he? And I think he can be called up.
Just give him the keys now. What's the point?
Yeah, I don't disagree. Obviously, it's a simplified view of it because there's going to be, he is driving an F2 for a team that isn't Haas, so it's not as if he's not driving for the Williams Junior team in F2 and, they can easily bring that up. And I don't think K-Mag's allowed to go and drop, like they can't straight swap them, for example, because I think there's restrictions on if you've driven too much in F1 or at all, you can't go back to F2.
Oh, no, I'm not saying Kevin Magnussen goes to F2.
But
I'm saying
just
he
in terms
off
of
into the sunset somewhere.
Yeah, but if I'm his F2 team that isn't Haas, Haas don't have a card to play there because they can't just go, oh, we're going to yoink you now because we want you. He has a team to drive for already.
They give him the other 2021 Haas chassis that they kept.
I get it. Kevin's not that bad. He's not.
He's bad enough to be banned next week, mate.
Yeah, but over the course of 3 years or however long the points stay for, it's not. As you said before we started recording, you were waiting to see this big incident that was going to get him banned, and he just locked up a little bit and went a bit deep into the corner and, rubbed off on Yuki Tsunoda. That absolutely that's a penalty, and the penalty system is what it is, and he should be banned. And I don't agree with it was either Gasly or Ocon came out. I think it might have been Gasly and went, no, I think they should overturn that. That shouldn't be a ban. That's not fair. But the previous 11 incidents probably weren't fair to the other person either. And it's a little bit like getting yourself sent off in football because you got a yellow for kicking the ball away. Well, if your first yellow was for 2-footing someone, it's not the second incident that got you banned. It's the culmination, isn't it?
Fair point.
But yeah, hey, I'm excited to see Oliver back in the car. Is what I would say.
And I dare say we'll probably do okay.
Yeah. And again, nothing to lose for him. Nothing to lose.
No. Complete free hit. He's not going to be up there like he was in Saudi because the Haas has square wheels and has a couple of hamsters in the engine bay rather than a Formula 1 V6. So I don't expect too much. But yeah, I knew he'd been banned for a race. I sat there for the entirety on replay expecting to see some Kevin Magnussen shithousery going on. And as you said, just saw him lock up on the inside going into the second chicane at Monza and thought, well, is that it? Yeah. And it does make a bit of a mockery of it, I think, because the moment that you would have thought there was a ban coming was after all that tomfoolery at Miami, with backing people up and driving people off the road and so on and so forth. But we've had to wait another 6 months or 5 months for that to come around and actually kind of then bite him on the arse. And the punishment, I don't necessarily think fits that immediate crime, but as you say, that culmination of events over the last 3 years are the ones that have got him to that point.
Because it's not an immediate crime punishment, is it? And as you say, he's probably been lucky to get this far. I'm 98% sure citation needed that he is the first person to ever be banned under this penalty point system.
I wouldn't be surprised by that statement.
I think almost proves the system is working in that we're probably agreed Kevin deserves to have a week off. And I agree that it looks odd that it's happened now, but had this incident have been one in the middle and then it went with a Miami-style incident, then I don't think anyone bats an eyelid. So I think the system is probably working as intended. I think maybe if I was driving on 11 penalty points, am I being a little bit more careful with my overtaking? I understand it was for the final, it was for P10, so I guess go balls to the wall a little bit, but
Yeah.
it may have earned him a few tens of thousands of dollars for scoring an extra point in his contract, I guess. So
People make mistakes at the end of the day.
I also think it's a bit of a win-win for Haas. I think they get a week of Behrman in the car as a freebie. They get a point still. As far as I know, there was no fine for the team. It was all on Kevin.
Yeah.
And they're getting rid of Kevin. So if I'm Gene, I'm sitting there on the phone going, well, actually, you know what? That's worked out quite well. I'll take that.
It's just a shame Gunter's not around anymore. Because
isn't it
I
just?
feel like he would have had something good to say about it. Have you... Well, clearly McLaren's the big thing that we need to talk about, but
Yes.
there's also some kind of internet people talking about the fact that Red Bull had a special valve on the back of Max's car which helped it go around corners, and since it got caught and removed because it was only on Max's car because they didn't put it on Checo's, so that they kind of limited their chances of it being actually caught, Max has then obviously sunk like a stone and is now driving around with Checo in 6th and 7th and 8th place respectively. Is that internet kind of people just being internety, or is that actually a thing, do you think?
I think it might actually almost be a call coming from inside the house, maybe, and a form of copium perhaps from a Red Bull fan base that for the last 3 years have pretty much had it all their own way and now have it none of their own way. That I think it's easier to accept that if you think you can pinpoint why. And when you've got Horner coming out and doing interviews going, we don't know. I'd love to tell you why the car now sucks. I don't know. We don't know. Adrian's gone. Help. And if you can, in your mind, attribute that to a potentially non-existent miracle valve,
Yeah.
maybe you feel a little bit better and you went, okay, yeah, they tried something, you got outlawed. That's really unfair on us, but okay, you watch it and you listen to Martin Brundle do his like, hell, we're going on a lap with Max Verstappen, talk us through it. And all you hear them say at the minute is, that looks a handful. That looks a handful. He's scooping that up. He's got this in that corner, that in that corner. And you do think back to, yes, I know he binned it on the final corner of that lap, but the Saudi quali lap in 21, and you watch that, and I don't know anything about the technical side of F1 cars or whatever, but I know a train that's on a rail and how that looks compared to, a go-kart on cold tires on ice. And they're not the same anymore. You can just see that car is not pre-programmed onto the racing line anymore. And I think Max is probably driving the absolute arse off it. And it's another tick in his box of how good he is, that, he's still managing at times to threaten that he might be on pole or might be on the front row or whatever in a car that I think is to put a really simple answer on the initial question, and then I'll throw the same question back at you. I don't think the valve existed. I don't think the valve was outlawed. I think that the valve is one of those I'm going to go weird analogy here. When you hear about like veterans that lose an arm in combat, but then they have ghost limb syndrome where they'll still have an itchy forearm even though they don't have a forearm anymore.
Okay, yeah.
And their brain makes things up. I think that valve potentially is a ghost limb, itchy forearm, I think.
I'll buy
what do
it.
You think?
I don't know is the short answer, but I do think it's something to bear in mind for the continuation of this episode. Because I think that is one point that I've got noted down with regards to what we now know is called Papaya Rules. We don't know what that means. And we haven't spoken about this. This is live. This is Dan and Alex going head to head here with regards to McLaren.
We did this deliberately. We've set up a live debate for y'all, so you're welcome. If this is the last episode of the pod, you know why.
But it's, the 3rd of September 2024. McLaren have a chance at winning both championships here in the Formula 1 2024 season. And they didn't win at Monza. Now, you are the McLaren fan. You are also an Oscar Piastri fan. Your back room there is illuminated with rather orange-looking fluorescent LEDs.
It's red for Ferrari, actually, but it's a white balance thing.
Okay, fair enough. Fine, whatever. I don't care. And I'd like to throw to you straight away with the question of, are McLaren fucking this up for Lando Norris?
Now, the specific wording of the question there is interesting. Are McLaren ruining it for Lando Norris? No. Lando Norris is hurting Lando Norris. And McLaren are maybe not babying him. Babying him is a harsh word. Are not babying him, and again, a horrible choice of words. They're not giving it to him, and they're almost saying, "You're a big boy. You can go and do it on your own." Is my feeling. That's my short answer. Flipping it back, go.
Flipping it back is, why on earth did Oscar Piastri hardball Lando Norris, his teammate, when he needed his teammate to help him out here, which we heard in Budapest was going to come back around for Lando, which is why they switched positions at the second chicane of the Grand Prix, which then caused Lando to fall behind the Ferrari as well as his teammate and find himself going from first to third place in the opening lap, who we are led to believe is a genuine contender for the World Drivers' Championship in 2024.
Oscar didn't ask for the place to be given back in Hungary. The team ruined it. The team got it wrong by putting the wrong driver in at the wrong time. And then the team, and I actually said this on Reddit to someone the other day, the team were not they were not desperate for Oscar to win that race. They were desperate to undo their own error so as not to screw their own driver out of a potential win. Because McLaren didn't stand to gain anything by Oscar winning that specifically. Oscar's going to win plenty of Grand Prix. He's very good. They were just trying to undo it. And I said this to someone yesterday that and it's all coulda, shoulda, woulda. If Lando Norris had immediately swapped back, the first time Will's on the radio, Lando, we got that wrong, swap back with Oscar, please. He goes, yep, sweet, no worries. Turn 4, get into dive bomb me or whatever, and we'll swap him back round. Lando Norris wins that Grand Prix because there was still 18 laps or something left to go. He would get past with what we saw play out over the course of that. Lando chose to play games with it that then made the situation more and more awkward, and we got to where we got to. Had he have just switched it straight back and then could have gone and Papaya Rules the last 18 laps, I have no doubt in my mind that Lando would have still won. So the upshot of it all is Oscar still turns up as a competitor. He's got 197 after this race weekend World Drivers' Championship points. No, he's not in a fight for the World Drivers' Championship, but he's 20 points behind Charles Leclerc. And now people are talking about, is Charles Leclerc a chance for the World Drivers' Championship if he keeps doing this? Admittedly, 20 points is probably more than it sounds like. He's 20 points off. He's not in a World Championship fight if those top three keep tripping over each other. So if he's going to get out of bed on a Sunday, I mean, bloody good overtake. Can we just talk about that for a second?
Superb move. Brilliant.
Wow.
Genuinely so good. But what are McLaren doing? Mm-hmm. That's what I'd like to know the answer to. And I don't necessarily expect you to kind of have that answer. And I suspect only one or a few people will know.
Yeah.
Because to quote Will Buxton, and I don't want to just go and nick people's words, and that's the kind of the benefit and disadvantage of us two recording this 3 days after the event. But normally most people have had their say by this point. But you surely can't keep fannying around doing this all the while that people will say that, well, it's still mathematically possible for Oscar Piastri to win the World Drivers' Championship. It is.
Yeah.
Absolutely it is. And it will be probably until the third race to go, potentially, if it continues to go this way. Maybe we are going to see an incredible overhaul of points here by Oscar Piastri, and we're going to be talking about Oscar Piastri as the World Drivers' Champion at the end of 2024, and you and I are going to, or I'm going to sit here in the end of the season and go, well, I'm an idiot.
Yeah.
But the reality of the situation is yes, I think McLaren are red-hot favourites to win the Constructors. I don't necessarily think that needs to be thought about anymore. McLaren haven't won a World Drivers' title since 2008 when Lewis Hamilton was at the wheel, when obviously you had that famous Timo Glock moment at Junção at Sao Paulo to win it and to break the hearts of Felipe Massa fans. You don't know when these opportunities are going to come back round again. We don't know what's going to happen over the winter into that last season of the regulations. It's, yes, at this present moment in time, McLaren are streets ahead of their competition, but they are by no means as far ahead of their competition as what Red Bull were at points in these regulation changes. So it's not beyond the realms of possibility that Ferrari don't turn up with a package next year, or Mercedes don't turn up with a package next year, and McLaren don't actually look like the car they do right now. And they don't get it right for 2026. And they're sitting there going, well, it's still 2008 when we won our last Drivers' Championship. Yes, the constructors are important. The drivers, I'd argue and say, is more important, which is good words. Why aren't they just going ham for it? I do have a point. I do have a theory. Which I will throw over to you, which I'll throw your way. And we spoke about supercomputers the other day, and I kind of feel like the one we spoke about. I feel like the one we spoke about the other week was maybe not that super. However,
very quickly, sorry, before you dive into that, deepest apology to Crofty, because we laughed at him that no, they're not going to overtake him in Monza, and if they'd have 1-2'd it with the fastest lap, they would have overtaken him in Monza. So fair play, David Croft. Sorry, carry on.
He knows things. There are a lot of intelligent people working in Formula One. Have they looked at the results of Red Bull? Have they predicted their trajectory until the end of the season and the potential drop-off with this imaginary valve and what they may or may not legitimately be able to bring to the table for the rest of the Grand Prix, and go, actually, we're going to get past them anyway? Have they put that into the equation? Because otherwise, I really, really don't understand why they're not at this stage putting their eggs in one basket and trying to become drivers and constructors world champions.
Yep. Oh, it's bloody tricky, isn't it? And this is the problem with a sport that is simultaneously an individual and a team sport. And you're never going to solve it, I don't think. Look, the other way to look at it, potentially, it's very clear that Lando wants babying, and he wants the team to do that. And he obviously has no shame in being given it, which, again, I understand. Don't come for me, Lando Norris stands. I'm a Lando Norris fan, right? But there's ways to win. Do we want to win like that? We keep doing this, but if it's cricket, if you can win by man-cutting someone, do you want to win by man-cutting someone? Yeah, you won. But, is that how we're going to play the game? Look, it's bloody tricky. It is bloody tricky. I didn't have any issue with Oscar's move, particularly if McLaren had said, which they did say, and they said, I think Zach Brown said it in the warm-up, they're free to race. We've got Papaya Rules, be clean about it, whatever. He was very clean about it. I don't buy the chatter I've seen that Oscar nearly spun Lando off. No. Oscar has gone around the outside at a point that you don't expect someone to come for you with a move that if it was Daniel Ricciardo, people would be going, late on the brakes, Daniel Ricciardo, wow! I think Lando has genuinely had a jump in the car. He's like, oh shit, Jesus Christ, okay, Oscar's there. And then that split second, that has, you got a wobble on. That's not on Oscar. If you want to be a World Drivers' Championship, you don't bin it there because someone tries to overtake you that you weren't expecting. I'm going round in circles on it quite deliberately because I honestly don't know. I am going to, once again, be irritating and throw it back with... I'm going to throw a question back at the question. And we're not really asking many direct questions anyway because neither of us have a real answer to it. Monza is 54 laps, I think, maybe 57 laps.
Yeah, maybe
this
even
happened
53,
on
actually.
Turn 4 of lap 1. So there are, 14... times 52 corners. Arguably, they're not all overtaking opportunities, but for the purposes of an argument, he's got 14 or whatever it is times 52 more opportunities at Lando Norris to overtake Charles Leclerc and then overtake Oscar Piastri and go back and win it. There was quite a bit of time left. He's not done this with 5 laps left to go and shocked him down the inside. There was an entire race still that it was no different if Lando had struggled to get off the line again. Well done, by the way, Lando. Lando got off the line, everyone.
Yeah,
Go on, son.
I mean, we can continue that argument slightly longer because the likelihood of winning from pole position at Monza is pretty small. I don't know. It's a weird one. Because not quite to the same equal measure, but you could throw that back to Budapest and say, well, after McLaren had fucked those pit stops around, Oscar had enough pace and had enough opportunities to catch up to Lando Norris and drive past him, but he didn't.
Yeah.
And then they had to kind of reverse the order and go back through. I think, like I said the week before, And it will be the question that until we know definitively as to what will actually happen here, and it looks like we are going to go a long, long way into this championship, and it might not even be relevant. We might be talking about Charles Leclerc, we might be talking about Oscar Piastri by the time we get around to November. But if McLaren lose out on this World Drivers' Championship for Lando Norris by a handful of points, how many moments are we going to have from Budapest to Abu Dhabi to go, well, if they'd just thought about it a little bit, could we have been having this conversation?
Yeah.
And if those roles were reversed, and this isn't me just kind of going, wow, this bloke's English, so therefore he must prefer Lando Norris. No, I don't care. But if those roles were reversed, and there's a great chance they could be, because in equal measure, McLaren do turn up next year with a car that's better than everybody else's. And if Oscar Piastri is in that position, I would be sat here in the same voice, the same breath, going, I don't understand why at this stage of the championship that they're not investing in one horse, because that's the smart thing to do. That's the logical thing to do. It's the sensible thing to do. And at the moment, they're not being prepared to do it. And I don't really know whose face they're trying to save from not just coming out and saying, in this instance, Lando has earned the right to be in that position where he is right now. Oscar, if you'd have done that between March and September, we would be investing in you. We wouldn't be looking at Lando if he was 40 points behind you, going, we're going to catch him up and we're going to overtake him. The bloke who is second in the World Drivers' Championship that has a mathematical chance of, and a legitimate mathematical chance of catching Max, he's the number one driver. Let's go for him. And if it doesn't work, we've given everything we possibly can to the cause of this. Yes, Oscar's not going to have a championship ring or medal or trophy or whatever Lando might get if he wins the World Drivers' Championship at the end of the season. But unfortunately, that is the nature of this beast. As you said, it's a very, very individual sport hidden in a team.
Yeah. Look, it's all shitty. There's your episode title. It's all shitty. But the thing, what's weird, there has to have been conversations. And this is almost the most confusing bit. It's not as if they haven't had a chance to discuss this. They've just come off 4 weeks off. This has been talked about. And I think they'd help themselves even if they came out and said, no, that's not how we do things at McLaren. We want to win the World Constructors' Championship. The Drivers' Championship is Lando's problem. Of course, we will make sure we do everything we can for the other 18 drivers to put him ahead of them, but we're not in the business of, nose to spite face kind of situation, then maybe that helps. But they've sort of said nothing, and now they've got cryptically, marketing teams had their hands all over at Papaya Rules, which was a little bit meme-worthy on the radio. Just say, this is Remember How We Race or something. We don't need... You can just
tell, Alex.
You can tell that
thing,
Zach Brown has made a PowerPoint that says Papaya Rules on it, and he's written on a flip chart. It's Zach Brown's flip chart, and he's gone, well, these are our Papaya Rules. It's like, just say, let's not be dicks.
Yeah, he stood there. He's not even had it pre-prepared. He stood there with his orange pen, or his orange board marker on his big A3 piece of flip paper, and he stood there at the front of the class with the two drivers in the front row, and he flipped this one over, and he sat there scratchily, just scratching Papaya Rules in orange pen on this horrible piece of white paper for Oscar and Lando to stare at for 4 weeks whilst they've been on the beach or whatever. Yeah. But I think, honestly, if they keep just playing about with this is the kind of behavior that doesn't land you wins ultimately. And it's the kind of brutal nature that you don't succeed in Formula One if you're not prepared to be ruthless like that. And I fear that's kind of where we're going. And I kind of think there could be conversations at the end of the season going, well, Max is the world champion, but he's not been the best driver in Formula One this year. And how you go and unpack that kind of parcel, I don't know how you do that.
I'll unpack it we can't dissect the entire season, but there have been plenty of opportunities to score the points that Lando missed out on this weekend, those 10 points. We love doing this. I don't know if you guys have noticed, we actually quite like cricket as well. In a game of cricket, you don't lose a game of cricket because someone misfields it on the last ball and what should have been 1 becomes 4, and that was the 3 runs difference, because those 3 runs could have the 3 runs that made the difference. It's the firing squad analogy: 10 people all fire, only one of them's got a real bullet, no one knows who did it. That's also a Formula One season. So yes, Lando has dropped 10 points that he could have had this weekend. But if you want to sit and go through the calendar, I dare say we could quite easily find 10 or more points that are entirely within his own cockpit. And I realize as I say this, I sound like I hate Lando Norris, which is the absolute opposite.
No, you followed him to Bali. You don't hate him.
Well, exactly. And it's not even like I'm trying to shout out Oscar Piastri either. I'm sort of trying to come as objective from the outside as possible on this. That you got to look inside and outside as well. And there have been a number of times this year, and the meme of how often Lando doesn't finish the first lap in first when he was starting on first, and a couple of times on quali that he should have been higher up and he said himself and whatever. Those 10 points, we can find them. We can find them outside of Monza if we need to. I also like to talk about something other than Papaya briefly, and we touched on it earlier. None of this is as big a conversation if Ferrari don't roll that dice and ultimately get the strategy call right on Charles Leclerc, because if you put Lando Norris into second and it is a 1-2, even if it's an Oscar Lando 1-2, that's a different story. We're talking more points again at that stage. We're reducing that deficit. It's keeping Ferrari slightly further behind on that WCC, which people are now talking about, whether we have a 3-way fight for the constructors. I don't think we quite do, but there's a lot of little things as part of this. And I would also argue that Leclerc being out in front changed the scope. Leclerc being out in front because of the strategy. Obviously, he was in front of Lando earlier, but when it was no longer McLaren sort of leading out, they've said so many times about clean air. I know he was far enough away that it wasn't a dirty air issue, but chasing a car is quite different from sitting at the front and setting your pace. And the fact that Charles was able to nurse those hard tyres home, I think is a lot easier to do from out in front, when you can go as slowly as possible until your pit wall goes a little bit quicker, please. He's getting a bit close.
Yeah.
He only needs to win by 1/10 of a second. So he can run that tank down, and go from there. So it's a lot easier. So well done, Ferrari, is the other thing. And it's almost sad a little bit that all of the chatter has not been that for once Ferrari got a strategy call right, and it was a bloody good one. All the chat is about other people, and it's almost a shame, I think, for Charles and for. I dare say Italy are not talking about the McLaren, situation. So we're possibly not in the correct target audience for what they're talking about. But I just wanted to make sure, because they obviously listen and they care about the opinion on this pod, that we gave recognition to the Ferrari strategists, and I quite liked how open they were. And I think Carlos said on the radio of, I'm not sure if these are going to get there, but sod it, let's have a look. Doesn't matter. Great. That's great.
No, good on him. Good on them.
I have, unless you have any other final, I appreciate, by the way, we've made absolutely no defining remarks about any of that, and we are getting sore asses sat on the fence. Unless you have any more comments to make on the Papaya situation, I have just a bit of a lols to finish, and then we have an email to quickly box off on as well.
I have no further comments to make, because I feel that we will be making more comments next week and the week after that. And the week after that.
We can come back around. If anybody wants to email with their thoughts, we can have a secondary dip into Papaya Rules.
The powder dry.
How about this, by the way? And I don't know if you picked up on this, because I think it largely went unnoticed. It's quite a common trait in Formula One. If have got a free pit stop and we're down into the last 3 or 4 laps of a Grand Prix, that you box and you stick a pair of new softs on, or a set of new softs on, and you try and set the fastest lap. Now, generally when you do that, you're successful. When you're Lance Stroll, and with 3 laps to go, you box for a pair of brand new soft tyres, and then you go out there, and you get done by a bloke who was cutting about on 22-lap-old hard tyres, and you don't get close to his time. Oh, boy. I mean, it doesn't look great. I know that there is some chat that perhaps they were very clever and they did that because those new tyres had a lot more rubber on them. They were worried about weight. So it might not actually have been a fastest lap attempt because they were running outside the top 10 as well, and their battle is not with McLaren. They don't need to try and take points off McLaren. There was a suggestion that perhaps they actually just needed to literally put some more rubber on the car because they were worried about getting it a little bit light. But that made me chuckle. Well done, Lance. You've covered yourself in glory again, my son.
He's just not very good at driving cars quickly, is he?
Not. No, he's certainly not. Right, we have an email just to finish off on. And it's one that we probably will carry on to next week. And we have an email from James. Hello, James. If you'd like to email, by the way, you can lapdownpod@gmail.com with any thoughts, like James has done here, because he's got a question that's not necessarily related to Monza, which is nice. We're finishing on a little bit of non-Monza chat. Dan, I'm going to address it directly at you. Do you think Mercedes' competitiveness was short-lived, or are they actually still going to compete for top points over the coming weeks? Go.
A short answer to the second question is yes. I think they will continue to fight for top points. I kind of look at them as at the same as Ferrari, really. It feels like their performance could be very specific depending on what track we turn up at. It kind of feels like their package that they've got along with Ferrari could be successful at very specific places. I do just genuinely think McLaren are just taking continual steps forward, and it is getting harder and harder for those two teams behind them to actually kind of keep up with their development. Maybe not even development, but maybe just understanding of the package that they've got. Because I dare I say, I'm not convinced how many huge developments are being made now.
I think that actually, I think it's a very good point that maybe doesn't get talked about enough, that it's one thing to design a package that in the wind tunnel is superb, and I've got no doubt that no team has ever brought an upgrade that the wind tunnel said was going to be slower.
Yes.
But it's another thing to actually make that then work with real world forces and find the dialed in setup for that package. And you can almost be left a little bit, and I dare say this is happening to Red Bull, scratching your head of like, but we were forecast a faster car. And you don't know how you get the controls of it, because you can't get it calibrated. And I think it's a very valid point that maybe people overlook, that they assume update is race ready immediately, but it's not. It's the furthest thing from, because you've got no idea how it actually works on a road.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, when you look at it really and truly, Hamilton had a pretty decent race. He finished 22.8 seconds behind the lead. If Leclerc had taken a second stop, that gap obviously to Leclerc would have been a lot smaller. He certainly, and
then you're fighting, aren't you, at that point?
Hamilton wouldn't have won the race, but actually the kind of that race for third place might have been slightly more of an option than what it was. And George just had a Grand Prix that we know George can have. It just wasn't very good, was it? And we kind of circle back around to those conversations about going, well, is George ruthless enough to be a World Drivers' Champion, blah, 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 all that other good stuff. And it was just a George weekend. Maybe the British drivers are just a bit too nice. Maybe that's the reality of it. Maybe Lando should have just driven his teammate off into the gravel and then kind of gone past Zach on the pit box like this, just going, there's your Papaya Rules, Zach. Maybe. I don't know.
On George being too... It surprises me, and I know that obviously Hamilton has been good in recent times, but it surprised you, and you may have looked at it, so it might not at all, to know that Hamilton is nearly 40 points ahead of Russell in the driver's standings and is 6th compared to 8, because that was a bigger gap than I expected it to be.
I knew this year he outperformed him. I knew at the midway stage that he was in front of him, and I think has been most of the year. And I don't really think it's been covered that much, because the narrative last year was the fact of, Lewis is washed, George is beating him, this, that, and
at the start of this year, what's Lewis Hamilton doing? He's given up. He doesn't fancy it anymore. Yeah. And he's 40 points ahead.
Yeah, and I think George, genuinely, I do think George, if Kimi Antonelli goes and sits in this Mercedes next year and actually does fairly well, which there's a chance to. He comes with some pretty high...
The one lap we saw him do in FP1 looked decent.
Yeah, he comes with some pretty high praise, doesn't he, from various people in the paddock. George could be under pressure. George might not be that number one driver to win Mercedes the World Drivers' Championship.
George genuinely might be out of a seat in 26 if Max goes, I don't fancy a Red Bull car anymore. You guarantee you that Toto's not kicking out, it's okay, Kimi, all good, Kimi. That's not the one you get rid of, is it? No. You get rid of Mr. T-Pose.
Yep. So, I mean, who knows? But yeah, I think Mercedes will be fine.
Yeah. I don't think they're suddenly going to go on 1-2 it.
No.
Anywhere. I think if they have a win, they're going to have a win because either they one of the two drivers says, let's do something contrary on strategy, or they're going to have a driver that was sort of right place, right time kind of situation. I'm not sure if I can see them winning a race this year entirely in their own garage. Maybe with the most audacious strategy, a Ferrari-style strategy call, but even then, I'm not sure if they're ever going to be quite as close to be able to just do it with an undercut, overcut, or whatever. I think look, we go to engineer speak of non-zero, but I think there's a genuine chance that we see another top step Mercedes this year. I just think it comes about maybe from a bit of a banger race.
It's a wet Singapore, and there's 3 safety cars and a red flag.
Five laps to go. It chucks it down with rain, and Lewis Hamilton sticks it out there and goes, "No, don't pit me. I can do it," sort of thing. I think that's how we get there. But I also think they're probably going to consistently be in the top 5, and I think they're going to qualify really well.
I think so,
all the way through, and they'll beat Perez easily. Anyone can.
I think I probably could. I think you could in that Lego McLaren behind you. So
yeah.
Nice.
Grand.
Good chats.
Well, hey, we came to absolutely no conclusions there. So what a 35, 40 minutes of chat that was to come up with absolutely no defining statements. Please don't, in our comments, be like people are in the McLaren comments. That's the last thing that I'll say. As someone that used to work in sports media, give you a hot tip. Nobody that's important at McLaren is reading those comments. The people reading those comments are the media managers who can't do shit and also don't care. You're making their life miserable, so stop it. And that's it. That's all I've got.
Well, I mean, what more can you say than that? Well done. Well capped off.
Right. That's us for this week. Dan, on the internet, you are...
at Dan Jads, so you can find me there if you'd like to. And yourself.
Come watch me play games. Hey, look, it's Alex on Twitch. You can do that. Thank you to everybody that engages with us on our little socials and stuff. We're trying to get some more of those clips out for you, so keep saying hi and liking and sharing and commenting those for the sake of engagement with the algorithm. And yeah, if you want to be like James or Andrew last week, and you can email lapdownpod@gmail.com with literally any thought you have about F1 or biscuits, because that is what we're here for on this pod. We'll be back next week to talk about Baku. I might research what the national biscuit of Baku is. They feel like they've got a biscuit. And we'll cover that next week.
Nice.
So thank you for hanging out and talking racing.
It was excellent.
Yeah.
See you in Azerbaijan.
See you in Azerbaijan.